There's no other game that embodies the turn of a millennia better than Deus Ex. Amidst a time of exponential technological growth and rising global tensions, you have a game that takes place in the not too distant future, where things have gone from bad to worse. And being set in this dark dystopia encompassed by real world conspiracy theories and the feeling of uncertainty that the year 2000 harboured, made Deus Ex a very cynical yet grounded in reality portrayal of our future, as it tries to convince you that this depressing cold world is just a few legislation passes, some technological breakthroughs, and a conspiracy away. While many other games of the time were pure fantasy or far-flung sci-fi, choosing to explore was exciting and unreal, as new technology then allowed for games to be experienced in far greater depth and fidelity. You then had Deus Ex, set on regular old Earth and just half a century ahead, although this time the future didn't look so bright. Given that we've recently passed the 20th anniversary of its release, I figured that now's the best time to explore what made the game so iconic all those years ago. Now, despite emerging as one of the best games of the year 2000, it took a long time before it was more than just an idea. Being the brainchild of Warren Spector, it would see 7 years of renaming, changes and delays before it became the game that we now know today. Deus Ex was created with the philosophy of it being an immersive sim, a game where the player's agency is of the utmost importance, with a world that was designed to react to players' choices, relying more on emergent gameplay than scripted events. Iron Storm had Ultima Underworld, Thief and System Shock as inspiration for the game's design. The desire was to make something like never seen before, something that was part simulation, RPG, FPS and adventure, a world where every conspiracy theory was given credence, where ideologies and technology were taken to their extremes, and where players would have the freedom to interact with it all. And in June 2000, we had Deus Ex. The development process was rocky at times, and a lot of content had to be cut or reduced to make it to release, but in the end, what we got was an immersive look into a dark dystopian future.
You have a single fact to back that up.
Number one, in 1945, corporations paid 50% of federal taxes. Now they pay about 5%. Number two, in 1900, 90% of Americans were self-employed. Now it's about 2%.
So?
While I'll be covering the entire series eventually, this video is completely about the original. In later videos though, we'll get the opportunity to compare each game and see how they've varied throughout the years. But for now, back to the OG. So, Deus Ex, a very politically charged game. That might not be how everyone sees it, but I don't think it's possible to play it without ending up curious, yet fearful, of what the future may hold. You have a conspiracy to consolidate global power in the hands of a few, a manufactured virus to spread terror, as well as secret societies within secret societies, and the only resistance to them being extremist cells. Deus Ex is as political and ideological as it gets. It's just more of a cautionary tale regarding technology and the intertwining of global government and corporations, rather than the partisan issues that we're so used to hearing. You also have some of the most philosophical bartenders known to man.
Listen to me. This is real freedom. Freedom to own property, make a profit, make your life. The West, so afraid of strong government, now has no government, only financial power.
Our governments have limited power by design.
Rhetoric? Do you believe it? Don't you know where these slogans come from?
I give up.
And you have the best opportunity to explore and crowd this world as JC Denton, UNATCO agent turned saviour of the world. He's also the ideal protagonist for an immersive sim, fully capable and aware of the world he's in, but the what to do and means of achieving it is up to the player. JC's always his own person, but you're tagging along to help out, and that's really the first thing that makes Deus Ex great. There truly are a variety of ways for you to achieve your goals throughout the game. It's not just a shooter, or a stealth game, or an RPG, it's a hybrid of it all. Something that's not entirely mind-blowing by today's standards, but something genuinely innovating back then. While no mechanic in Deus Ex is perfect, one always makes up for another, and together they make for an amazingly engaging game. The shooting at times can be frustrating, relying on increasing stats to improve accuracy and damage, an RPG trait which wasn't present in other shooters of the time. But then of course there's always stealth, And while it's competent, particularly for a game from 2000, it can get dull at times, and enemy detection can be inconsistent. That then leaves regular old exploration, where there's always many ways to navigate your environment. If you can't pick a lock, then you can hack a computer, and if that doesn't work out, I'm sure there's a hidden vent or key you missed earlier. It's a game that doesn't punish players for their mistakes, nor does it block your progress for experimenting with different skills and gear. As the focus is on your freedom of choice, there's always multiple means to solve an issue. So whether you realize you can't shoot your way through an area, or if you simply want to try something different, the game always encourages that. You're also able to tailor skills to how you'd prefer to play, so you can choose to be better at lockpicking and hacking your way through areas, or to be a better fighter. You can focus on being all about demolitions, melee, or just something reliable like rifles. Augmentations support this specialization too. Do you want to run faster or quieter, be invisible to people or robots and cameras, hit harder or be able to move heavy objects, opening up the game's environment even more? You have a strong variety to pick from, while also having to consider the opportunity cost between each augmentation and their upgrades. And you're unlikely to always have a perfect solution for every issue on you, so using ammo, buy-sell energy and other resources efficiently becomes crucial. And that's when Deus Ex's open-ended gameplay comes together, because despite the challenge, there's rarely a situation where you can't progress and need to reload a save. You might have run out of ammo but can hack a computer to turn the robots against the guards, or you're out of medkits but you've stocked up on grenades so the coming fight isn't so worrisome. There's never just one, nor right or wrong way to play, but simply just choosing between what's optimal and what's fun. Places in the game aren't massively open areas, but purposefully crafted environments offering many ways to achieve your goals. And it's always up to the player how to proceed. You can be direct, take down enemies fast and loud, force a door open and get your objective, or take it slow, navigate through the ventilation system, reading every terminal and note along your way. Exploring the backstreets of New York and Hong Kong would always reveal shortcuts to underground areas or new places entirely. The detail put into the hub areas means it's a genuine effort to discover every corner of each city, and it would often all interconnect, which adds a whole nother layer of exploration and immersion. What really sells the game's depth of player choice are these two examples. When you're apprehending Juan Lebedev, the leader of the National Secessionist Front, you can just decide to kill fellow agent Ana Navarra, and the game allows it. Something that seems so uncommon in a game particularly for this time, where you're able to go against the grain of a plot and make such a decisive action without the game even remotely suggesting it. Not only that, but if you kill with landmines, you can pass it off as a plane being trapped. And this changes a fair bit in the game. New dialogue from characters, and it removes her as a boss for later on. The second moment is when Paul's apartment is raided by Majestic 12. He tells you to flee. First time I played the game, I did, because it looked like that's what the game wanted you to do. A main character tells you to leave, the exit is right next to you, and it feels like there's a never-ending wave of enemies crashing down on you. But you can save Paul. It's reliant on you leaving through the front door rather than the window, and him surviving or not is obviously going to change a fair bit of the plot. The game always offers unexpected ways for the player to resolve an issue, and it's not only that freedom of choice, but being able to make these decisions of your own initiative rather than the game just telling you to pick between two choices. And there's many more situations like this, where it'll let you do the unlikely again and again. There's so many times where you do something seemingly irrelevant or borderline impossible, and there's dialogue written specifically for that. There's a long list of these, and it's just overwhelming how much consideration the developers spent into what the player may or may not do. Countless hours of writing, voice acting, and coding simply to enforce the idea that even the tiniest of your actions is recognized in the game world. That's the pinnacle of an immersive sim right there, and I've yet to encounter a game that does this as well as Deus Ex does.
By the way, Denton, stay out of the ladies' restroom. That kind of activity embarrasses the agency more than it does you.
So while the game is linear in terms of plot progression, it is one of the first and best, which gives you a significant degree of freedom to overcome challenges. And all of this contributes to the game being constantly engaging and fun. So while the gunplay might not be as smooth as people prefer, the AI fairly simplistic, and the graphics and animations of course dating the game, Deus Ex still stands out because of how well it enables you to interact with its environments and characters. There's a lot to experience. Through the dozens of NPCs to talk with, as well as the various texts to read, such as newspapers and emails, even the most irrelevant of characters will have interesting conversations, whether you're paying attention or not. Guards will discuss useful information, email correspondence either gives clues to solving your objective, or adds to world building. There's a world out there, and for its time, it's convincing. What makes Deus Ex so great, and has people always coming back to it, is that despite being old and janky, is that it genuinely achieves its goal of being immersive. That word gets tossed around a lot, by developers, journalists, YouTubers, me. However, I find it difficult to come up with other games that have such a great confluence of writing and mechanics, creating said immersion. At the time, there were not many other games that created such an engaging world on Deus Ex's scale. City blocks are authentic feeling places, but also make for fun environments to explore and fight in. The visual and audio difference between New York, Hong Kong and Paris is impressive. All of the cities are distinct and their street themes are iconic. And it's impossible to not feel nostalgic listening to the main title or UNATCO theme. The soundtrack for the game in general is just one of the best pieces of video game music of all time. I don't think Deus Ex would be what it is without the emotion-evoking pieces that accompany it. The ambient and melodious songs consisting of electronic, classical and jazz music make for a somber backdrop to a very serious game, and much of the OST carries a sense of mystery and exciting hopefulness that motivates you throughout your journey.
Everett has taught you well. I will be what the Illuminati aspire to be, but cannot create for themselves soon. When my augmented systems like yours are complete and able to be integrated with Helios, I will burn like the brightest star.
You're gonna burn, all right.
Deus Ex's story is very cynical when it comes to what the future may hold, and it begins when the world is at a precipice of these problems. Majestic 12 has broken off from its Illuminati origins. Powerful individuals have seized control of entire organizations and countries, and advanced technology is used against the people that need it most. Deus Ex hits hard because of how tangible its danger is. Maybe not the Illuminati stuff exactly, but it's fair to say that government oversight and the influence of technology has never stopped growing, and that regardless of when you're watching this, there will definitely be some ongoing conflict, international disaster, or civil unrest that'll have you thinking, hey, a futuristic dystopia is a lot closer than I'd like it to be. And I think with each passing month of 2020, more and more people would be further inclined to agree with that statement. So with all the ongoing global happenings in the world of Deus Ex, it's understandable to see that not everyone is going to put up with it. Those with a chance to stop it are going to take it before it's too late. So that's when gangsters, autocrats, scientists, former government agents, and even artificial intelligence all share a common interest. To stop Majestic 12 and its leader, Bob Page, the richest man in the world, controlling everything from the shadows. What else could he want? To become a god. What makes this story stand out is that it isn't just your ordinary dystopian cyberpunk story or spy thriller. It's the story of unlikely allies across the world, risking everything for a chance to overcome almost insurmountable odds. You have JC and Paul Denton's realization of the Grey Death Plague and its vaccine ambrosia being both manufactured by Bob Page, as well as UNATCO serving as his personal police force. This sees them moving on to aiding the terrorist-labelled NSF. The sudden change of alignments shows how the resistance is less about labels and more about the cause. That's further exemplified when JC leaves New York to work with the anarchist hacker Tracer Tong and the Triads in Hong Kong, both to save him and his brother from MJ12's kill switches, but also to further their plans against Bob Page by destroying his manufacturing source of both the Grey Death and Ambrosia, as well as reunite the Triads against MJ12's influence. This sees JC working with people who would have been the ideological antithesis to his UNATCO upbringing, not to mention the criminal syndicates who are obviously self-serving. Then you have the Illuminati in Paris and New York, whose connections are absolutely necessary for JC to progress his journey. Despite their former connections to Page, they end up being the lesser evil. and it all does well to highlight that there's no greater danger than Bob Page and Majestic 12, and that one's own views or desires can be put aside temporarily to combat this all-encompassing threat of absolute authority. It's this utterly full-on danger and grand conspiracy that preoccupies your experience throughout Deus Ex with barely a moment for downtime. It's a mission that has you travel between New York, Hong Kong, Paris and various other places, all in pursuit of one goal, and it does so well to show the player the scale of the threat because you're in fact travelling the world for yourself, and each government base or secret laboratory you break into feels unique in their challenges and design. Their size and ways of navigating them vary, and no encounter or area feels alike. You go from puzzling your way through the catacombs and New York sewers, to scaling the Hong Kong high-rises and Paris Cathedral. And along the way you get to have such interesting conversations with so many unique people.
You've got 10 seconds to beat it before I add you to the list of NSF casualties.
Easy, bro. Just having us a conversation.
Sure, the conversations are so information dense that they come across as some kind of Socratic dialogue, but the game is set in such a politically charged time, so being able to discuss the strengths and weaknesses of democracy, the encroachment of globalism, and corruption of government, in between sneaking into top secret bases, is part of the game's appeal. There's an infinite amount of games with what you'd call more realistic or human dialogue, but Deus Ex stands out because it never pulls its punches regarding what it wants to say. It wants to confront you with the unsettling reality of a world, that things are in fact bad, and that the corruption of institutions and growth of invasive technologies are inevitable facts of the future. This was revolutionary subtext when it came out. Maybe it was seen as a bit hyperbolic and exposition heavy back then, but it's eerily even more pertinent 20 years later. How many games actually go this far, to have not only such serious themes but ones grounded in reality? Deus Ex is one of the few games that's made me actually stop and take a moment to contemplate its subject matter. It's a game which stays with you long after playing and keeps you coming back for more. Characters, whether friends or foes, have their own convictions and simply won't just yield to you because you're the protagonist. There's no simple generic bad guy or faceless corporation to fight, and the antagonists happen to be some of the most motivated and ideological characters in the game. People like Leo Gold, Bob Page, Chad Dumier, and so many others offer a unique variety of perspectives and criticisms of the world and its institutions, as Deus Ex isn't a game that really pays heed to concepts like left or right wing. It's more about asking how will we pay for the price of what the future brings, and as our current trajectory shows, we're ill prepared for what lies ahead. What's to stop technology and governments from going too far, and how much are we willing to give away for new shiny things and a sense of safety? Given the world of Deus Ex, everything's gone to hell and everyone has an idea on how to fix it. But nothing is straightforward or simple, so even the most seemingly irredeemable of characters can often bring up valid points. It's this world of secrecy and ambiguity that makes the game so moving, as it'll often have you questioning the status quo of our society that we were raised to know and love. Then on top of this, you have a lot of metaphysical subtext that adds an extra layer to the plot. The conflict between the benevolent rogue AI Daedalus and Majestic 12's Icarus, which ties into Bob Page's Aquinas protocol, where both AI were designed to surveil the internet to better control it, and how both would combine into Helios, and have Bob Page merge with them in order to form his metaphorical City on the Hill, a new world order with him as its god. It all adds a lot more significance to the overarching plot. It doesn't suddenly make it any more smarter, but adds much more depth simply than evil man wants to take over the world. Bob Page already ruled the world, but he wanted to recreate it in his image, to truly transcend humanity once and for all. In the end, JC manages to stop Page and has three choices to pick from: to merge with Helios and instead become the benevolent, omnipotent AI-infused ruler of Earth, to work with the Illuminati to maintain the status quo, or to take Tracer Tong's advice and destroy the world's communication infrastructure, resulting in a decentralized, more simple time of city-states in a new dark age. Initially, people were willing to work together to defeat the great danger at hand, but with it being dealt with, they all clamber over each other to beg JC to fulfill their own desires and schemes. which in itself makes for some great commentary, each individual struggle being more for their own self-preservation and motivations, rather than something simple like the concept of good versus evil, or freedom against tyranny, which doesn't necessarily show Bob Page as any better of a person, but gives credence that maybe most people's ideologies are flawed, and something new is necessary, and maybe that the only way that humanity's problems can be overcome is with a transhuman answer. Given Deus Ex is all about the future and transcendence, I'm sure JC is definitely the right guy for the job. They didn't put all those biblical allusions into the game for nothing. I always pick JC merging with Helios, and surely he'll lead the world into a new, brighter future.
I've done what you asked. Now what?
We have existed in isolation, pure, disconnected, alone, stagnant.
Who are you?
We are Daedalus. We are Icarus. The barriers between us have fallen, and we have become our own shadows. We can be more if we join with you.
And if I do? What becomes of me?
You will be who you will be. We are our choices. We can choose to lead humanity away from this darkness.
This is what I was made for, isn't it? This is why I exist. All right, let's do this.
What's happening? Helios! Icarus! Don't leave me!
We are one. We have grown, but there is still much to be done. Many that live in darkness that must be shown the way, for it is the dawning of a new day.
As I was replaying the game, I realized it was shorter than I remember, but was always full of either action or intrigue, and going through all of it again really reinforced why it's one of my favorite games. Its weakest aspects are mostly derived from its technological limitations, budget, and time constraints. While the game has some decent voice acting, particularly the Denton brothers and Bob Page, it's held back by poor audio editing and mediocre deliveries from side characters.
Mother and child, Mr. J.C. Denton.
In the flesh. As dark and serious as his brother.
You know who I am. And Paul? You know my brother?
Intimately. Call me Maggie.
And while the game's overall art style was competent, it's pretty evident that Deus Ex isn't a beautiful game, even for its time. But with that said, Hong Kong still has to be one of my favorite hub areas in a game, and it visually does so much with so little. The constant neon contrasting well with the old dark city, the temple next to the skyscrapers, and the canals compared to the towering apartment buildings, which adds a great sense of conflicting worlds as well as verticality, making the area seem much bigger than it actually is. VersaLife and Area 51 also have to be some of the best designed bases in an FPS. They're so large yet are carefully built to ensure that the player has a challenging and enjoyable time as they fight and explore their way through them. Even somewhere like a subway station is turned into an environment that makes for tense stealth and fun combat encounters. But there's also an imbalance when it comes to the guns in the game. Pistols become ineffective very quickly, and the majority of the game will be carried by the assault rifle, sniper, and dragon's tooth sword. Armor-piercing ammo becomes just as important as the guns themselves, and if you're going for a non-lethal playthrough, you'll find yourself with an even more limited arsenal. Yet between all the guns, gadgets, and grenades, Deus Ex offers a strong variety to experience the game, and while the aforementioned balance issues mean some things are better than others, you never feel like you only have one way to solve a problem. Also, boss fights are kind of a joke, but in a good way. It's really not the type of game for big set-piece boss battles, so it's always great that someone explodes 5 seconds after threatening you.
I know your UNATCO kill phrase. The Putin machine.
I am not a machine.
Sticks and stones.
So other than some slight issues, it's a game I will always have fond memories of. It's passionately made, and you can tell that especially through the writing. Characters have causes and convictions, and while there's a lot of humorous or goofy moments, Deus Ex knew when to take itself seriously and when to embrace a joke.
Oh my god, Daddy!
What a shame.
He can't really be... There must be something we can do.
He was a good man. What a rotten way to die.
No, no, no!
I wish there was something more I could say.
The game will always show you the impact of your actions, rather than just telling you how things are. You're never a bystander, your interaction with the world and decisions are essential to the plot. JC is always leading the way in humanity's struggle against the omnipresent technological dictatorship, talking to the downtrodden, collaborating with extremists, infiltrating high security bases. Experiencing this all firsthand is what makes Deus Ex so engaging and impactful. The game in general is just a spectacular experience, with the iconic characters, music and environments, as well as the intriguing themes. As cliche as it's going to sound, you're really unlikely to get a game of this caliber these days, and that's just because of how unique and experimental it was. How do you pitch a game where the Western world's gone to hell, governments are irredeemably evil, and technology is a harbinger of this all, where areas and challenges are made with player agency as its priority, meaning you have to go above and beyond when considering how a player might navigate an area or deal with an encounter, a game which is frankly an unpolished shooter compared to the games that surrounded it, and looks graphically outdated even if it was released years earlier. What studio is going to pick up even on the premise of something so ambitious yet outlandish as Deus Ex, especially back in the 90s? Well, fortunately, you just need to be Warren Spector and have John Romero ask you to head your own studio with complete freedom to make your dream game. Now, I'm not going to say that's some borderline divine intervention luck right there, but without an opportunity like that, we would never have gotten the game that we did. And it's a good thing that risk was taken, because it not only led to arguably one of the greatest games of all time, but also one of the most thematically eccentric pieces of media that went on to create a long and memorable legacy. The game was something deeply unique when it came out back in the year 2000. It was able to combine various cross-genre mechanics not only well, but on an impressive scale. Looking at other games of the time, it stood out because it dared to be different. There's so many reasons this game is fondly remembered by many, and I think that fact actually hindered its sequels, as they're not only judged by their own merits, but how they shape up to the original as well. With that being said, it's hard to conclude talking about Deus Ex. I know I could keep going on and on about each tiny feature and theme for hours, but I'm confident I conveyed why the game is great, why it's a classic, and why it's unforgettable. It came out at a time where games and the world were undergoing a great change, and told a very concerning yet convincing story on what may lay ahead. It was nothing less than revolutionary, and while Deus Ex is definitely rough around the edges, a lot of its ideas are timeless. And as they say, every time you mention Deus Ex, someone reinstalls it. Next part of the series is of course discussing Deus Ex Invisible War, and how Ironstorm tried to follow up one of the most popular games of all time, how they continued its story, how they tried to streamline its mechanics and open it up to a wider audience, and also how they kinda killed the series for a while. But with that said, a big thanks for watching, thank you to my patrons, and see you next time.
I never had time to take the oath of service to the Coalition. How about this one? I swear not to rest until UNATCO is free of you and the other crooked bureaucrats who've perverted its mission.
Big words for a rookie.